Welcome back to the Good Eye Podcast. I'm Jay Smack, and I'm really excited today to have Jane M. Powers back on the podcast. Jane and I are doing a joint event together, and I'm going to make this intro real quick because we get into all the details, and it's a slightly longer episode than normal because, I mean, when you're in the same room with Jane, the energy just takes over, and it's really hard not to be completely infected with her positivity and energy. I urge you to check her out online, janempowers.com. So Podcast Speaks is coming up April 29th and 30th. We go into all the details. I'm not going to belabor that here. Thank you for engaging with this podcast. This event is really exciting to me, and I'm really excited to be partnering with Jane on this. So let's get right to it. Here's my conversation all about Podcast Speaks at the end of the month with Jane M. Powers on today's Good Eye Podcast. And Jane Powers, welcome back to the Good Eye Podcast. Jane M. Powers. It's important to get the M in there. Do you agree?
Have to. Otherwise, it's boring. It's so boring.
Well, this podcast, it's funny. It's really evolving. And part of that has to do with people like you. And the reason I say that is I've gotten quite a bit of feedback from several episodes. The subheading, really the positioning statement for the podcast, I guess you could say, is good stuff for lifelong learners and giving back. So really anything can fall under that umbrella. But the episodes I've gotten the most response from are... well, I'll give you several. One is the guy, James Burke from the Mars Society, Lori Hedges, who is a world traveler and documentarian, and your episode, when you talked about your core program. I literally had people call me and say, who is that and how do I get in touch with her? Because I need it. And it's not just business people. This person was a teacher who wanted to develop a program that she wasn't seeing in schools. And someone else wanted to do it about, and this kind of goes back to the whole Joe Dispenza thing, about changing some things in their lives, and they thought your program could help them with that. And that's so cool.
Is that why my phone was ringing off the hook?
I tried.
See, they do work, people.
But I tried to tell them she's not on East Coast time, so wait till she gets up, but they don't listen.
They don't. But here's the truth. The core program and what we're going to talk about, what I'd love to talk about today is you and I having our first official rendezvous, April 29th and 30th. And I apologize for you East Coasters. It's going to be 8 a.m. Pacific time because Arizona, we're stubborn. We do not change. And it will go from 8 to 5. So you guys will be up a little late, but trust me, we'll keep it exciting enough. But what I understand about people is they want fast and easy. And back in my younger days, I definitely was. Okay, that's a whole nother podcast. But what people want is at a glance, how do I understand how to connect? Because our world is moving so quickly. And I'm going to tell you, once we let the barn open up and we are free to roam about the world, I'm telling you, everybody's going to be fast and furious because we're craving connection. So and truth be told, I confess this to all, I ripped off every personality profile on the planet, crammed it into the science of Jane, and created the core communication program, which I don't know if you know this, Jay. There is the subcategories of core communication. We have core kids. So the teacher would love this program. We have core kids, core love, which is relationships in your personal life. We have core leadership, core sales, just about core anything. This is what will work in any relationship, whether you're looking to do more sales or looking to have more love, doesn't matter.
It's a really cool program. And I went through it for one of the day-long sales and personality profile sessions, and it was fascinating. And there's such a peace of mind when you sort of arrive at quote unquote who you are within core, as you're talking about personality types. There's such a peace of mind when it sort of backs up what you already know. You're like, oh, I've been telling the world this for years, where, And that's a lot of what it does. And it's sort of like they say, write down things, like write down goals, write down lists of what you're going to do that day. It's a little bit like that. It's there in black and white, and you know it, and it sort of empowers you to move forward with whatever you're taking on. So I'm really excited.
And I think also what it does is it makes you go, oh, that's why I've been screwing up.
Yeah.
More importantly, it wakes you up to where you're like, oh my God, the whole time it's been me. It's not the other person. So it's an eye opener. What's that? I think there's know thyself, like know thyself, then you'll know the world. And once you can understand you and how you navigate situations in the world, I promise you, everything gets easier.
Yeah.
Everything gets easier.
No, I can totally see that. And what much of what you're saying goes along the lines of some of those other suggestions from people who teach empowerment, where they say, once you remove the ability to have excuses, where it's always somebody else, you didn't get the promotion because of somebody else, you didn't get the opportunity because somebody else didn't like you. Once it removes those excuses, it really is empowering, and people tend to move forward.
I still like to blame other people, though. It's easier on me. Like my psyche can handle me just blaming. I worked in the prison, drug and alcohol treatment centers. I worked frontlines counselor in sexual abuse prevention. And, in AA and the 12-step programs, they always say, when you're pointing one finger, you got three pointing back at you. So I always just point with my whole hand, like all fingers are out pointing towards that person. So it never points back at me.
That's good. You just kind of point your whole hand at them, like you're throwing a curse or something.
Exactly.
Well, it's interesting because as an audio guy and somebody in the creative services, I got into podcasting, and what I'm getting at is that podcasting can do a lot for people that you are talking about. Some of the same things, because I got into podcasting by accident. I was a broadcasting guy, and I was tired of stations changing format and me being out of a job and the potential of moving across the country, which can also be exciting. But then you start to have a family and you start to not want to drag them with you. So I was doing a radio show, and I was tired of jumping from station to station. And that's when podcasts were really starting to come out. It was about 2005, 2006 when they started getting really popular. And I said, I'm tired of this, and I'm going to lose this show. And the show was a local music show. I've always loved working with local talent, and I didn't want to lose it. So I said, I'm just going to make it a podcast, and then I'll have it, and I'll get to keep doing it. Maybe nobody will listen, but it's not a big deal. But when you provide that platform, not just for yourself, but then I started helping other people do it because it was kind of new, and they were like, will you show me the ropes? And I did. It is really empowering when people think, oh, I can't do all that, or what would I talk about, or I have no idea what subject I'd talk about. And then you really have to do some thinking, some introspection. What are you about? What are your passions? And it starts to come out. And once you put it down, much like writing everything down, once you put it down in a recording and listen back, first of all, people are horrified because they're like, I don't sound like that. Yes, you do. And then they start to hone it, and it starts to take shape, and they start to get some feedback, and they really start getting into it. And then aside from just the self-exploration, its application for business does the same thing. It really forces you to focus, craft your message, and you're having one-on-one conversations with customers. So it was really cool when I met you, and it seemed like this could be the person to really help me move forward and help people get their message out on this platform.
Yeah, and here's the truth, and Jay is very gracious and humble. He's no ordinary podcaster. Like, that's all I have to say. First off, I am a podcast junkie. So I listen to a lot of podcasts. I'm also a podcast hoe. Like, I'm on a ton of podcasts because I absolutely, you know what I love about podcasts? The podcaster, you, the host, you're great listeners. And I love to talk. I love to speak. So I love podcasts because I'm like, excellent. Nobody's going to be hogging for the stage, which is so ego driven. But nonetheless, so Jay, you've got, not only do you have the technology, you have the production, you have the editing, but you also have the voice. And I will say, second to none, you're the best interviewer. And I have been on TV, I have been on radio, I've been on everything. You are one of the best top interviewers I have experienced, because you have an interesting way of pulling out of others just some obscure and random questions, so related to what we're talking about, but you see behind my answer and you go deeper than that. And I think that's brilliant. But the podcasting world, it is exploding. I mean, it has exploded. COVID, thank you, has created we've got to create stages of our own. And that's when I met you. I'm like, oh my God, you, for what you do and how you do it, this is going to be like into the stratospheres, because there's podcasting and then there's podcasting. And we know what that means. I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to tell you. Yes, I am. There's podcasting that it'd be what I would do, Jay, because I don't have a lot of technology. If I was like, I'd be like, I don't know, this feels like it might be good. How's it sound? Test, test, test. And it may sound terrible. And then I cut off the front, I cut off the back, I put a logo on there. I separate the audio and out it goes into the world without a theme. Well, I mean, I would have all that, but this is what most people do. They don't have a theme. They don't have you've got to start everything you do with the end in mind. So I'm doing a podcast. Why? Because I love it. Excellent. It's a hobby. Then you hobbyize it. Is that a word?
It is now.
It could be. Put it in the dictionary.
Jane Dictionary.
But you make it a hobby and have a blast doing it. What I hear a lot is people, and you correct me if I'm wrong in the world, but what I see many times, they're like, oh my God, I love this podcasting. I'm going to do podcasting. And they're out there, trying to rub two nickels together and put that podcast together, and they just putting it out in the world and hoping it lands, rather than having a theme, a title, a direction, a solid message. I don't care if you're like, hey, we're going to wing it. That's today we somewhat are, but there's never just winging it when you're an experienced podcast host or guest. There is a direction that you go. And what I see, the biggest mistakes that people are making, number one, is they're not leveraging their podcast to either make money, which can be a challenge, make money from that podcast, or lead them to a business. Many podcasters don't have a business that I have experienced. And I talked to them about, well, have you thought of monetizing it this way? And they're like, oh my, that'd be brilliant. So that's why you and I, we're like a match made in heaven. You've got all that tech, the voice, the business side of the podcasting world. I've got everything you need to know about messaging, business, driving traffic, and how to close deals from a podcast, which is an invisible, intangible production. I mean, truth be told, you get out there, you can promote your podcast all over the place. You got to do it the right way, though.
I totally agree. And you made a lot of good points that I want to touch on. One is, you said you would probably do it the easiest way. And a lot of people do that, and that's fine. There are services where you can sign up an account, and they'll even let you record directly into them, not even thinking about all the equipment. And that's one thing that I took for granted for years was, it's pretty easy. But I was an audio engineer, am an audio engineer. And even though, I mean, it wasn't forest for the trees, but even though I knew how to do certain things, I figured you get a USB mic, you're good to go. But I felt bad about that because I wasn't trying to placate or patronize anybody. I just thought it was a little bit easier in the production side than it actually is. And that's all people want. They want to just know, they want a little bit of information so they can make it sound good. And that leads me to another one of your points. Often the sound of the podcast, especially if it's for business and you want people to take you seriously, one of the things that works against you the most is your initial environment. It's so simple, but if you're in a hard room with a bunch of surfaces and you get nothing but echo, it's hard to listen to and people won't take you seriously. And that's a minor thing, but it's a big thing. And the other thing is message. You talked about messaging. And you spoke highly of me as an interviewer. I appreciate that. But that's my curious mind with an advertising background at work, I think. Plus, I'm very curious. I like to read a lot and stuff. But it's all about messaging. If you're thinking of your message through the filter of reinforcing what it is you do, whether it's your business or personal, the interview will sort of run itself, because as someone talks and offers their perspective on whatever it is you're talking about, you're running it through the filter of your own business's message. Now, that's not to say you're not listening, because listening is absolutely the first and most important thing, because your question, the next question you think you're going to ask, will change 30 times based on what someone has just said. So we talked about getting to know oneself early. Podcasting does that for your business, because your message, your brand, your positioning statement, whatever you want to call it, is constantly at work. And the most important thing to that podcast, it lets people get to know you. It lets people get to know your business, and you'll learn a lot about yourself and your business by running everything through that message filter.
I love that. You know exactly how you're preaching to the choir. And here's what it's wonderful. I was on a podcast. I've been on quite a few, but I can't remember who it was, but he had his pad and he had all these questions. And halfway through, he just threw his notebook. He goes, I had an outline. I'm done. He's like, this is going 40 million different directions, because it's not only the host. The host is going to guide you in a nice direction. Your responsibility as a guest is to guide them, the entire production, in the direction of your message and your brand and your recognition. Now, what we're going to be teaching at the workshop is how to make it a yes and, how to be a host or guest. But if you are a host, see, I think anybody should show up for this. I don't care if it's like, I never want to have a podcast ever. You've got to be on podcast. That's our new platform. That is our new stage. So when you come to the event, what you'll learn is not only the production value, which is going to benefit you, but because I know sometimes I'm at my home office, which is my guest house. It has a 9-foot ceiling, maybe 10, I can't remember. And it's woo, 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 it echoes. And I want to get big what do you call those little egg crate cushions? I want to put it all over so it stops tinging and sounding, like it's not a studio, which it's not, which is okay. But at the same time, you don't want to annoy people. I listen to some podcasts and I can't, one of my podcasts, I'll tell you, I love Murderish. I love that podcast, but there's a number of other ones. Wondery has a number of them. And there's certain ones I can't listen to because of the voice and the way it sounds, the quality of it. So what I think is absolutely vital for podcast hosts or any kind of host is to be able to interview while showcasing your business. And it sounds so innocent, but that's what we're going to teach is how do you host and still showcase your business rather than I was on a radio show one time and we're talking and we're way off in this other subject matter. And the host went back to, well, that's a lot like my business. And I'm like, well, that seems, it wasn't even related. It wasn't even related. And I thought that transition was clunky. So vital transitions that showcase you while your guest still can showcase them. And it's also how to be a guest without being obnoxiously seating. I can do seating where people are like, I think she told a case study where people go, I have a client, Bob. Bob is my favorite case study. No, that doesn't sell. That's too much. So in what we're going to do is bring together our host and guest strategies to weave in your message, weave in your brand, and weave with a number of clients. Did you see what I did there?
That was pretty slick. You should do this for a living.
Dr. Seuss today.
Well, you talked about having it be the platform you have to be on. That is absolutely true. Just to it's the new blog. Basically, you should still have a blog. But why do businesses have a blog? It's the exact same reason they should not only but also have a podcast. Blogs use keywords. Those web crawlers are out there pinging those keywords and drawing traffic to your website. Podcasts do the exact same thing. And we're going to talk about also how you can set up the podcast page itself on the web to do that work for you as well. Aside from the fact that Google is now indexing audio. So you've got Google bumping into your podcast, indexing the audio, and then also indexing the show notes. It makes it such a valuable tool. And we're going to go into all that and how you can, get those Google eyes looking for you and come up on the top of, and that's not even my thing, SEO. It's just part of part of podcasting that I learned along the way, especially having been in the recording and the advertising industry, because it all works together. And podcasting is one of those tools that can do all of that work all at once for you.
You know what I love? I always call myself an accidental genius. Like I will, I think what you're saying about, Google, having the googly eyes, what I find, it's like you discovered that and went, oh my God, that's brilliant. No, now I can teach it. Now I'm brilliant. And that, I love that. Like accidental genius. I love when that happens to me. I'm like, yeah, no, I knew how to do that. And it's like, no, really, you just discovered it by accident and now it's your thing. And so I love that you have so many secrets to the every aspect of podcasting. And I've been listening to a lot of podcasts on Clubhouses where I'm telling you, every podcast person wannabe or is on Clubhouse. That's another new platform. You can't record, you can't do, it's a conversation. It's more of a social learning hangout. That's how I describe it. Where what I love about what you do, Jay, is you have got every aspect of podcasting. You've got that big view, the visual of how that can work. And what I adore is that, again, you're the accidental genius. You're like, hey, here's what I discovered. And I love how humble you are around that. I'm not as humble. So when you come to our workshop, you may not see that I am humble-ish. But what I want to do is I want people to learn how to use podcasting for good rather than only serving the world with your message, but serve yourself. Many times we're cutting off our arms, our legs to serve the world, and we're not taking into account, wait a minute, I got to eat. I want to grow my business. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take, because for me, any form of monetizing your message, doesn't matter if it's podcast, it's stage, books, it does not matter what you are delivering. My goal and my accidental, not so accidental genius is I can take anything and turn it into money. I mean, I wish I could take this thing I'm playing with on my desk, turn it into money. But anytime there is a message to be delivered, you can monetize it. So it's how do we drive traffic? How do we get sponsors if that's what you choose to do? How do we do affiliate marketing? How do we do podcast swaps? I remember years ago, I don't know if you know this, years ago, everyone was doing webinar swaps. And I was new in the marketplace. I've been doing this a very long time, but I was new in the market of coaching. And I contacted this big wig and I'm like, hey, let's partner and how can I support you and you support me? And he goes, why don't we do a webinar swap? And I go, that sounds brilliant. I hung up and I thought, what? I don't know what that is. I have no idea. He should have just said, I'll be on your webinar, you be on mine. But it made it sound like there was some convoluted method to this. And I'm like, okay, I don't think I ever followed up because I don't know what that is. I have no idea.
You recede into the bushes.
Exactly. I'm like, whoop, I was gone. Because I thought, what? I'll look like an idiot. People, here's what I'm going to tell you about business ownership. And here's what I'm going to tell you about life. We're always going to look like idiots at some point. If you're trying to be perfect, oh my God, that's number one, that's really boring. Number two, it doesn't allow you to grow. The more mistakes you make, the better you will be as a human being. I remember, the giveaways. Everybody's doing giveaways. So like they opt in and then they grab your free thing and everybody go. Then you add to your list and the host adds to their list. I did my first giveaway and the person said, hey, I need the image and I need this and I need the link to your gift. I said, excellent. So I gave a link to my Dropbox. And if you right now you're laughing, if you understand how this works, what that means is they go in, they love my gift, they click on my gift, and they get the gift. They didn't have to put their name, their email, they didn't have to trade anything. They just got my gift. So I used to not tell that because I thought, oh my God, people are going to know you're a rookie. Well, I'm not a rookie anymore. I'm like,
now you at least have to sign something, have to prove that they were there.
Exactly. How it was so embarrassing.
Here, take it all. my grocery list is in there too.
Thank God I had one dedicated file to that. But if you're trying to be perfect, it's not going to produce as many results. I'm going to tell you, my millions. There's my humbleness, but I tell that I say that to impress you, not to yeah, I do say it to impress you. Sorry, guys. I say it to impress upon you, not to impress you. That with the right message on any platform, you will create millions. You've got to strategically think about the steps that go into not only the message, the quality of the message, the order of the message, but also how do you utilize the variety of platforms that are out there. My platform used to be live stages. That was just about, and then I did media, radio, TV. But when the pandemic hit, it became a virtual stage. And I don't care if you think you're a great speaker live. I do not care. You are not that same speaker virtual. I promise you. I've been doing speaking over 30 years. I promise you. You're dropping the ball somewhere.
It's a different arena. And that's an interesting point in that whatever platform you're on, whether it's a podcast or a stage or TV or radio, they're all a little bit different, but they all have skills that doing them can help you hone, and you draw from one to do the other, but they are very different. You're right about that. And you also made a point about messaging and not just saying the same old stuff and not putting the same old stuff out there. That's actually that point right there about having a positive voice is the reason I started one of my podcasts, and also the reason why I wanted to start helping people produce theirs. And that's because there's already so much, and this is not fatalistic or cynical, there's already so much bad news and badly offered news and information. So why not take your message, whatever it is you do, and have it be empowering? Have it, no matter what it is. If you sell concrete, the best you can be and why you're great for that customer and what your message is, get it out there and live by it. And in that, you're already helping put a little bit more positivity out there. Now, in your case, as a coach, the coaching scene has grown quite a bit. And guess what? Every one of them has a podcast, because it's perfect for that platform of spreading positivity and reaching people that they can't reach by traditional methods. But we'll talk about all that.
And the thing is, it's not there's effort in everything we do. If you create, I have a lot of people that are like, okay, I've got an online course. I've got my online course. And you still have to find people to get the online course. You still have got to, you're like, I'm blogging. Well, you still have to drive traffic to the blog. It's no different than when we started private Facebook groups. In our private Facebook groups, we determined we've got to drive traffic there. That's a great way to engage. Once you engage, you still have to get the people there. Otherwise it's crickets. It's, you don't have, a lot of times what I think with podcasts, I think what's interesting is there are some, and speak to this if you would, Jay. Sometimes people have titles that I'm not sure what their podcast is about. Like, I listen to Murderish. I know what that's about. Now, what I didn't know, and I love this, the gal who does, she goes, "You're listening to this podcast not because you're a murderer, you're murderish." Oh, I am like, oh no. I don't know what that meant, but it didn't sound like I had a promising future.
Sounds like you have potential.
Potential. I might. My family. I grew up very interesting. So I might. Talk a bit, speak to us a little bit, if you would, about titles, and are they important? How about the theme? Is it vital to the survival of what you choose to do with the podcast?
Everything that comes out of the speaker, ear pod, whatever it is, that speaks about your podcast, especially if you're relating it to business, which is kind of where we're leaning as far as doing it for business and to help your business, is important. So you've got that world, the audio, what you put out there, the messaging, like you said, your tone of voice, how you present, everything that comes out says something about you. That's not to say you should hang on every word and be afraid to say anything, because this is why it's a little bit more challenging, I think, than sometimes people realize. It's not hard. It's actually very accessible compared to some other media, but it's very important to strike that balance, and you only strike that balance. And this is also a thing in acting and voiceover. I'm also a voiceover actor. That is one of the most difficult things to access, and that is performing while sounding natural. But you're not just sounding natural, you are natural, but you've got to present it in a way that is not just you mumbling on the couch while you're watching TV. It's very different. Now, so there's your audio side and your presentation side, which is all important. And we'll talk about interviewing and tone and all that. But also the other component, and this is what a lot of people just don't even think about, and to answer your question directly, is the titling and the words that you put with your podcast. Can you start one of these auto-recorded podcasts that some services offer and just upload it to them or upload it to Apple Podcasts? Yes, you absolutely can. You're done with it. You don't have to do another thing ever. But the accompanying site, the website, even if it's one page, that title talks about you. It needs to tell people what you are quickly with as little confusion. The colors you choose, the episode titles, all of that is very important. They're working on two different fronts, the audio and the presentation, and you can integrate video as well. We haven't even talked about that. All of that speaks to really the emotion of the person and having a one-on-one conversation with potential customers or your community, wherever that might be, within your profession or your industry. And then the words that are working for you on the internet are drawing people in who might just kick the tires, but they know what you're about. They might leave. They might kick the tires and leave, but you're way more likely to have somebody stick around and check you out, if nothing else, for the titles and the show notes. They may never listen to your podcast, but they may see that you have one, read some of the show notes, see what you're talking about, see some of the things you address in it. And it's all about providing value. As much as content generation on YouTube or anything else, it has to be valuable. So if you have a business, and the example I like to use is a window company, something, very middle America, very straightforward, couldn't have anything more benign, but it's also important. If you give people content in conversations with experts about winterizing and what makes a good window, what an average price, what it costs to install a window, they may never have heard of you or seen you or know about your business. But when they sit down to Google search, if you come up and you're answering the questions they have, you've just saved them hours and hours and hours in their life that they may have lost, that they've not gotten back. And they're probably going to be grateful to you, and they may reach out to you to have you do the job. So to answer your question, the titles and the verbiage and the notes that you put online to accompany your podcast are absolutely just as important as the podcast itself.
So I love that. And it's interesting because what I think what most people do not do is underestimate their potential buyer. Like most people no, they all know that. No, a lot of people don't. You wouldn't believe the smallest things that people are YouTubing, checking YouTube. Like we got up to our mountain home and the remote wouldn't work for the fireplace. So of course I get about 20 YouTube videos and I'm like, oh, this is awesome. I fix it. We look at most what we're looking for, whether it's through the video or audio. And I love that podcasting is a yes and. It is a yes and, because sometimes people can't get the full feeling of who you are without the visual. We have visual learners, we have auditory learners. So I love the fact that it provides both avenues for that. But I'm looking, and when I Google or put something in, I throw a bunch of words in that I hope will answer my fireplace problem, or in your example, the window problem. And thinking about the windows as you were saying that, I'm like, as simple as the secrets to a crystal clear cleaning process of your window. Who doesn't want to know that? Most people don't know it's the newspaper. Use a newspaper. Then there's other products that I didn't know about that makes it even better. So underestimating your audience, I believe, is what wins the game. Underestimating by giving the most basic information that there's one podcaster, she does her podcast in a little broom closet. I mean, it might be a little bigger than that, but it's got the best sound quality. So the smallest adjustments can make the biggest difference. More importantly, the language that you utilize within your title. So my question, Jay, is it best to have a catchy title with a subtitle, or what's your philosophy on that?
That's a good question. A lot of people don't bother using subtitles. It is allowed for in many of the platforms. If it's for business, I would recommend it. But you want to be careful. It's a delicate dance. Recommend it because it's more words working on your behalf. It's further clarifying what the show, podcast, or episode is about. But you need to be careful because it's not a free-for-all. It's not Wild West. And providers, platforms like Apple Podcasts, which is absolutely the 800-pound gorilla. Spotify is making a play. They're really coming hard. Several other outlets. But if Apple Podcasts sees you not adhering to the best practices and the norms and the requirements of the various platforms, i.e. keyword stuffing, if you say, and I remind me to go back to your point about underestimating your audience. That was a great point. I have something to add to that. But when you're keyword stuffing and you're saying best tips for easy window cleaning in the winter, and that's the name of your episode, and down below in your subtitle, you're saying Anderson Windows, Windex, Easy Clean, whatever it is, and you're keyword stuffing in the subtitle, they will flag you. Mm. And Apple Podcasts, they can do whatever they want. They own the platform. They are not the FCC, but they basically are. They say, no good, you're down. We're pulling your podcast, and we're not going to reach out and tell you why. You have to find out that your podcast has been pulled down and go and search them out and say, what happened here? And you might get some feedback. So more words working on your behalf is never a bad thing, but you don't want to keyword stuff, and it can't be really a hard sell. That's another delicate dance. You just put the information out there, provide value, build it, and they will come, but you have to be true to your message. Now, the point that you made about underestimating your audience is a great one, because we were all told that there are no stupid questions, but nobody wants to ask the simplest questions. if you're answering the simplest questions already, like you said, that people have, without them having to ask them, they're going to go to you for the tougher questions. You know, that if somebody says, I don't know how to change a tire, and I'm embarrassed to say anything because everybody knows how to do it, and there's a garage saying, 4 easy steps to changing your tire, they're going to be so grateful. They're going to come to you when they need a head gasket replaced, that kind of thing. So I love that point.
Yeah, that has been, I learned that, my gosh, when I started speaking, I won't even tell, let's just say over 30 years ago, I remember hearing someone say, you just need to know 2% more than your audience. And I thought, well, I don't know how much information I have, so I'll just feel like the smartest person in the room and deliver from the basics to the advanced and watch how the audience responds. And I'll tell you, we get stuck more with questions. We get stuck in the minutia of the lower end design of what's happening in that workshop, that it just floors me, because I think, oh my gosh. And I had a lot of clients. I was a life mastery consultant with Mary Morrissey, and I don't even know what that means, but I do know that it's about mastering your life in the various areas. But Mary is a brilliant teacher around the realm of your new thought. I dive into Dispenza with the thinking. And I had a number of clients who were certified as life mastery consultants, and they were speaking the language that was far more advanced than I believe the average bear has. And, studying Thoreau and Emerson and all the more advanced new thought. And they'd be like, well, I feel like I've lost my audience. And I had to remind them consistently, only about 1%, this is my number, 1% to 2% of the population dive into that specific languaging. I believe you have to become trilingual so that you can speak so many languages that people understand. That's where we came back to, circling back, where we came with CORE. CORE has 4 personality types, 4 key individuals that have certain traits, values, operating, systems of how they walk in the world. But if I go in and assume everyone is like me, I am going to be the most obnoxious speaker on the planet. If I only speak to individuals that are like me, I will lose 75 to 85% of the audience. What I believe is absolutely vital, 2 things. 1, know who the heck you are, become more balanced in who you are so that you speak 4 of the codes, like you speak all 4 of the codes. So in your messaging, back to your point of titling and description, there is actually truth. It is authenticity in, here's the value I bring, here's the promise, but you must still position yourself as the expert. Like, that is within the interview. You heard Jay say earlier, I'm also a voiceover actor. Like, he didn't do that to plug, but it's an authentic seed of who we are. It's authentically what you're doing. So your descriptions, I was sitting here thinking of a podcast, cash money, buy my stuff, like cramming everything into there. So people are like, oh, and you'll see people do that. They try to put titles with all the different, it's like, it becomes inauthentic, and it's a turnoff to people, because you're like, wow, you're just trying to sell me. Like, I'm just one more number in your portfolio. Where I think if we go back, the bottom line is be authentic, but be an authentic business person. Be authentic in, I'm here to grow my business. I'm going to do it authentically and not obnoxiously.
That's a great point. And to your point about stuffing the subheading, there's really no need, because if you're doing it right and you're setting it up correctly, there's other places for that and other ways to do that. You're just outing yourself, being crass by stuffing. It's like when you see 50 hashtags on a post, everybody kind of does it, but like you said, it's a little bit of a put off. What are the most important ones? Otherwise, the hashtag philosophy can live in the post itself. And to jump back a little bit and talk about underestimating. Did I say it was a voice actor? I'm not really. Your audience. There's the podcast community. And this is sort of a bonus when people get into podcasting. The community is so welcoming. And a lot of them are just doing it because they love it. And they're finding their way through it together. So I don't want anybody to think, well, I would, but you said it. Nobody likes to ask stupid questions. No, in the podcast community, there are a lot of people who come out and ask for information or help to the rest of the community. Facebook groups, like you said, Clubhouse and places like that. That's what it's all about. We're all, even though it's been around for 15, 16 years now, we're really all figuring this thing out, the norms. I said it's not the Wild West. There are best practices and norms, but you figure them out along the way, and that is empowering. Stupid questions are asked within the podcast community that are not stupid questions, just as much as they are anywhere else. So nobody should be intimidated about jumping in because the podcast community loves to help each other.
And the podcast community, quite frankly, I will say that they're pushers. But no, you got to have a podcast. Come on, just try it. Take one hit of a podcast. Right. They love it. They're like, all the kids are doing it. Come on. They love the podcasting world. And I'll tell you, I have, since meeting you, I jumped in because I wanted to learn. I wanted to be in the knowing. And quite frankly, I'm always looking for ways to create my own stage. And it's the complication of it. That's why we're doing our workshop, April 29 and 30 from 8 to 5 Pacific. You go to podcastspeaks.com and we'll put that in, I'm sure, in the notes, of course. But what I think is vital is it's not, let's just throw it together and hope it lands. And you can go, I've been learning online. I've been up YouTubing a ton of stuff. I've been, Googling everything. I can get just enough information. The implementation is where most people fail. And if they are implementing, they're like, you know what, I'm going to throw some spaghetti against the wall. Let's see if it sticks. Great. I'm all about give it a try. If it doesn't work, figure out how to do it right. But what I am a big proponent also of do it right the first time. So with your expertise, Jay, if we get people up and running, a podcast with all the right bells and whistles, with the right production, with the right editing, with everything put together it's great. It's fine. I don't like fine. But if we're going to take a podcast, I highly recommend you start with the end in mind. Then what I'm going to do as part of our workshop, I'm doing the messaging. I'm going to teach you how to be the best interviewer on the planet while seeding your business in an authentic, casual way. Then what we're going to do is talk about ways to monetize how do you utilize that platform to drive traffic somewhere, whether it's you have a book, whether you have a business that you're selling widgets or you're selling yourself, your services. It's absolutely important that you blend those two together, because just having all this sexy paraphernalia does not make you money. It's fun and it makes you cool. The mortgage company does not take cool as a payment. So what I can't emphasize enough with the style by which Jay and I work, Jay is detailed. You'll learn how to build your entire studio. Some of it, I shouldn't overpromise, but we're also going to bring in the delivery of it. And what's your worst experience, Jay, on a podcast?
Aside from the last 59 minutes? No, this has been a blast.
That one's on me. One's on me.
Worst experience on a pod. Oh, you know what? This is easy, and it's not a big deal, but it was a very disinterested. You said you were a podcast hoe? you're a great guest. I have to say it was, aside from technical issues, that happens all the time. I think it might have happened a little bit earlier in this podcast. You can't avoid it. There are gremlins everywhere. But it's disinterested guests who are not simply racking up appearances, but only racking up appearances. And you can kind of tell they kind of don't want to be there. They just want one more title. It's a little bit upsetting. It's disappointing. And you get a few minutes in, maybe 5-10 minutes in, you realize I am Sisyphus here, pushing a boulder up a hill, and this is going nowhere. And you're looking at the clock and say, we've only been talking for 4 minutes, and it's just that kind of thing because, like I said earlier, you want to be providing value. And also, your guests do reflect on you. It's your podcast. They're not going to say, Jay was great, but the guest didn't seem that into it, but boy, was he great. They're going to say that was a terrible episode. And if, sometimes people, if they go to your website and they look at links of your podcast on your podcast page, which is right next to your blog page or what have you, they may click on one episode. This happens a lot. They'll click on one episode. They'll take the scroll bar. They'll jump to the middle just to say, I'll get into where they're really going. And if nothing is going on or it sounds awkward or something like that, they're going to bail. So I'd have to say that's not a big deal because podcasting is not the end of the world or the beginning of the world. It's a great tool. But that said, when you've gone to the trouble of inviting them on and working and providing them a platform, and it's time consuming. You got to produce the episode, you got to do the notes, and it seems like somebody doesn't care. It's more disappointing than anything else. So, and that is all over the podcast forums. People talk about, they'll come in and ask you questions and say, have you ever not published an interview after working so hard to get it going because they're scheduling and stuff? And everybody says, oh yes. Oh yes. No, there's been several times when I said, I just can't put this out there. So that's probably it.
Yeah. That was my next question. I was going to see if you had not published a podcast based on lackluster or just, I know I was talking to a friend of mine who's a podcaster, and he said he got 5 minutes into one and said, you know what, this is not a good fit for us. And he just was done. He didn't continue on with that. I think one of my, when you're talking about that, one of my probably more challenging experience. Now, trust me, if somebody gives me a mic, I'll fill 59 minutes. I'll fill whatever you need, 59 days. But you do need some, a little nudge every once in a while, a little, I was on a podcast and all I got back was, oh. And I wasn't sure if it was, oh, God, she is boring, or, oh, that's brilliant. You want to gauge from someone's response. And I kept working, and all I kept, oh. I thought, you know what, I'm going to take this over. I'm going to share what I want to share and move from there. But yeah, you've got to be prepared. Now, let me ask you this, because I can't remember, Jay, if when we did we've done a couple of podcasts together. I can't remember. Do you request questions?
I provide the opportunity. Yes. I say, if there's anything you want to talk about, anything you want to stay away from, because this is not a gotcha situation, or anything specific you would like to talk about, please let me know. And there have been several occasions, to answer your question, yes, because sometimes it's a liability issue or non-disclosure issue, and they're really very careful about what comes out, and they don't want to be caught in a situation. That's not to say it's a puff piece. It's a podcast. It's a discussion, so it's not going to be that structured. But yeah, if an organization that you think highly of, and specifically, I'm thinking of nonprofits, politicians and stuff. That's a whole other world. But nonprofits have to walk a tightrope a lot because they have donors and they have regulations and they have, tax considerations and things like that. And they're very wary of how they're portrayed, and they should be. So I have said, if you're uncomfortable, if there's anything specific you'd like to talk about around an event or a fundraiser or something, then just let me know. I can absolutely work with you. But when it comes to businesses, It's kind of a relationship, whether you make that available to your guest or not is completely up to you. But at least the offer makes them comfortable. Say, feel free to provide the questions, or I can provide my questions to you in advance. That's not to say it's all scripted, but it's just a show of respect.
I train all of my clients. I train every client. And you've played this. I think you've played this. I call it the pickle game. I do not care what question. If somebody can ask me a question about pickles, and it will come back to my business and what I do in the world. And so I call it the pickle game, because what I see many times on podcasts, or I've experienced with individuals, is when the order of the questions, if the questions aren't there, they're like, oh my, I studied those questions. I know the answers to those questions. And what I love is the pickle game, where again, it's ask anything. I want to start a podcast that's called Gotcha. I want to have the most bizarre, wild questions. And like somebody I was on with Donnie. Oh my God, Donnie, he was a great interview on a podcast. And he goes, now you know what time it is. And I'm like, are you going to ask me some random, obscure, wild gotcha question? He goes, no, we go into the man cave. And I'm like, oh, okay. I thought, well, that was lackluster, because what makes a great interviewer and interviewee is to surprise, not, pull the pants down of the guest, but to surprise the guest with something different. Because what that does, and believe it or not, as a podcast host, you want to be surprised. You really do, because what that does is it shows the human side of who you are, and it sells exponentially greater than what your other one did. So it is truly, it's not, I have to be very, calculated. You have got to trip over yourself so you can laugh at yourself, so that your audience goes, oh my God, they're so real. It reminds me, you've heard this story, but when I was speaking, I've been speaking over 30 years, and I was on stage. I was at a corporate event, sales event, early morning meeting. I think it was like 7:30. And I'm not a morning person, but back in the day, I was a very formal speaker. I was very polished. I was very formal in my delivery. I had my suit on and I was delivering. And I said something, I don't know what it was. I said, but when you deliver the fart, what will happen? And I in my head, a lot of voices that go on as a speaker. Part of me said, oh my God, you said fart. That is hilarious. The other part of me said, just keep going. Nobody noticed. And I thought, this is a great opportunity to test, is the audience truly engaged in me or the material? So I stopped and went dead center stage, and there was hundreds of salespeople. And I said, I just have to ask the question. Either you people are not listening to me, or no one in this room thinks farts are funny. The room died. They all were like, whoa, like she actually, and from then on, I was never the same speaker. But the audience will reflect, whether it's audio, visual, stage, live, virtual, the audience will reflect your energy. So if you're very polished and formal and uptight, the audience will have that same reaction. If you are real and authentic, that's what you get in return. So I love the gotcha. I love the gotcha, because what it does is it actually makes the audience see you for who you are. I'm a firm believer, podcasting, every single thing you do, tell the truth, and tell the truth quickly. Not like all your dirty, dark secrets, but some of the secrets that you don't want people to know. Maybe like me, I didn't want people to know I have a BA, not a BS. I understand a bachelor's of science is more advanced than a bachelor. I went to the same amount of classes, but I didn't want people to know I wasn't that great of a speller. I didn't want people to know certain things, that I came from a really crazy, dysfunctional family. And I used to hide that. But I'll tell you, I don't share everything, but people come up to me and go, oh my God, I'm so glad you told that story. I'm not the best speller. And I'm like, listen, I make millions, whether I can spell or not. And people need to understand and connect with you on every level.
No, those are great points. I think I was thinking more of the gotcha as all of a sudden you have a piece of information that's going to embarrass the person or call them out. But keeping people on their toes, that I would put under the heading of providing value. It's interesting. Yeah. It's a great listen when you're engaged and you're back and forth. And ironically, that's the opposite of my scenario where the guest just didn't want to be there and you're just counting the minutes and eventually you pull the plug, because when it's going well, it's a real rush. When the guest is on and you're on, and you can feel it and you can hear it as a listener, and that's really what's most important.
That's our other podcast, Busted. That's gonna be our other podcast, Busted. Hey, I found this out about you, and the guest will be like, that'll be a quick.
You're gonna have a whole series of one name titled podcast. Gotcha, Busted, Fart, whatever that was. Yeah.
Oops would be a good one. Oops would be a good one.
Oh, oops, no.
This was my oops.
Oh, no. What would oh, no be?
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
Oh, no. That's a lot. We got a lot of those.
Oh, and thank you, as we start to put a bow on this thing, thank you for actually mentioning the date of the event. I don't think I did that, April 29th and 30th. And I'll have information on my website. Of course, you will too. That's jsmack.com and Jane M. Powers. Now, do you use the whole URL, just janempowers.com, right? We'll get everybody there.
Powers.com.
Okay.
Yep, janempowers.com. It'll hop right over. But here's what I think, and what we'll do is send them to podcastspeaks.com.
Right, good point.
So everybody go there. This is a complimentary event. You got to put a seat deposit down. Why do we do that? Because it is too easy. I was on a call last night. There were supposed to be 15 people on the call. There were 2. It wasn't my call, but I hopped on. I thought, well, they had 15 confirmed. So what we do, we're putting this together with the greatest value. So you walk away with everything you need to get moving on the podcast scene and to create your own platform. It's just one more way to generate leads, to fill your funnel, and to drive traffic to whatever you're doing, whether it's a service or a product. It does not matter. But truth be told, if you are looking to host a podcast, definitely want to do that. But if you also are looking to be a guest, there is no better place to understand what do you need to have by way of some of the technical experience, but more importantly, and I should say as important, is how do you have the messaging? How do you message effectively so that people are saying, you know what, I got to follow that person. I want more of that person. So what we're going to do is we're going to underestimate you. We're going to underestimate the listener, and we're going to start with the basics, because quite frankly, that's where I had to start. And I'm pretty smart, but boy, I had to start basic and utilize the expertise that Jay has. And Jay is one of the best. And if you want to learn how to do it right, you want to learn how to launch your first podcast or just be a host on a guest on the podcast, April 29 and 30. 8 to 5 Pacific time. Sorry, I'm not getting up any earlier. You would hate to have me any earlier than that, but we're going to be firing this up, and I invite anybody you'd like. $97 seat deposit, fully refundable. You show up, you get your money back.
Awesome. It's going to be a blast. This has been a blast. Yeah. Thanks, Jane.
Always.
And we'll see everybody then, and look for us around. We're going to hit some other stuff and get the word out about this thing. We've just had such a good time doing it, and I've been as surprised as anyone as I've been doing this for a few years, transitioning recording and broadcasting a voiceover into this whole podcast thing. It's just a blast, and it's the best tool your business can have right now.
Excellent.
Thanks, Jane. Talk to you soon.
You bet.
Oh man, this is going to be a blast. I do urge you to check it all out, and please join us at the end of the month. Thanks so much to Jane for making time and doing this podcast, and of course working out this event. Those that know me pretty well know me as a pretty laid-back person, but I'm really excited about this. And like I said during the episode, I just got bitten by the podcasting bug, and as a broadcaster and producer, I put all that together and just want to help you produce podcasts, and more than just what mic to get, what software to get. I want to really get in there and dive in and get into the essence of what it means to find your voice and get your message out. So we'll see you on April 29th and 30th. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you so much for your time and attention today on the Good Eye Podcast.